I'm really pleased, Craig, to have you speaking with us today on the 5 ways to beat the competition with trigger events and account-based marketing. So welcome to this session.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So for a quick introduction on who Craig is, I figured I would just start with, Craig is the creator of trigger event selling methodology and the author of Shift, Harness the Trigger Events to Turn Prospects into Customers. And this has been a great methodology for you over the years as you've been able to generate millions and millions of dollars for the companies you've worked for, and then mentor other companies to do the same thing. So we're very pleased to have you participate. So why don't we start off, Craig, by you telling us a little bit about yourself. I gave you a little introduction, but about yourself, your strategy, and this notion of first in wins. I think that's really important.
Yeah, so as you said, for 20 years, I was basically just a lucky sales guy. I just had this knack of always being in the right place at the right time. And I had, as a good salesperson, I always had the right things, but it was the right person, right time thing, I think, was my luck. And it turns out it wasn't so much luck as it actually was timing. And it's all about reaching people who have had an event or a trigger, right, a change that makes them unhappy with the status quo, but they haven't done anything about it yet. And when I worked for my last company, it was called WorldCom, and I was the #1 sales guy in like 6 months. And this was right after 9/11. So that's even a bigger feat than you would normally think.
Right.
But then they admitted to conducting all this accounting fraud and nobody would buy from me, and I wanted to figure this out. So I reflected on all my big wins, 6, 7, 8-figure deals, and basically I figured out 3 things. One, there's this thing called a window of dissatisfaction. On the first in, during that window of dissatisfaction, my track record was about 80%. Turns out I'm really not that special because the data says it's on average 74% when you're first in during this window.
Right.
I then figured out that there are events that create this window, and it turns out there's actually a sequence of 3 different events in order to get someone from the window and then become a customer. And then basically the last big thing I figured out was I did something I had not done for 20 years. My managers had taught me this thing called a lost sales analysis. The theory was if you lose the business, you don't want to lose the lesson.
Right.
But for the first time in 20 years, I analyzed all the business that I won. And lo and behold, there was all this stuff that was hiding in plain sight, and all of a sudden it jumped right out of me.
Wow. Well, it's a lot of good experiences to bring you to that conclusion, right? In those 3 steps. So good for you, and thanks for sharing that with all of us, along the way here. So, when I started reading up on you, Craig, I have to admit I'm a huge fan. And one of the things that struck me was this notion that you have of converting what most of us as marketers see and most of us as salespeople see as a dead end. That is hard bounced emails, but you don't. You look at that and say, I know how to leverage this. Can you describe that to us?
Yeah, so it turns out people leave this buying mode of status quo and go into this window of dissatisfaction because of an event. So people either we try stuff, like we try an awareness strategy, I'm better, faster, cheaper. The problem is if I give you a really good idea, but you have a better relationship with my competitor, you'll more than likely borrow my idea, give it to someone else. Doesn't work.
Right.
If people have a bad experience with the current provider, that also works. But sometimes that's hard to figure out. It turns out that one of the best ones is actually a change inside an organization. And a change in decision makers is one of the big ones.
Right, sure.
Because the data I've seen says that of all the decision makers that are new in the role, and I think of decision makers as VP or higher, all the decision makers that are new in the role, of all of those that will make $1 million worth of decisions or more in their first year in their job, 80% of those make those decisions within the first 90 days.
Wow.
So a bounced email tells me this guy named Matt, who was my customer, has left. I need to follow him. I can't wait for him to come to me. I need to follow him. So I need to find out where has he gone. And when I figure out where Matt has gone, I want to stay in touch. But what I also want to do is then actually there's a second opportunity. I want to say to myself, who did Matt replace? Because the person Matt replaced is new in their job. They now have more money, more authority, and more influence than they used to have. I need
Right.
to reach out to those people. Now, let's pretend Matt was not a customer. I tried to get in but couldn't. Well, all of a sudden, Matt now has a replacement.
Exactly.
So now I want to go talk to Matt's replacement. And when I talk to Matt's replacement, the first question I want to ask is, where did you come from? Because that tells me here's a job that's going to be filled, and that person will be new in the role at some point later. So these bounced emails tell me that there's been a change in decision makers, and I actually now have 4 different opportunities based upon that single bounced email.
Right. So that's the event that triggers the next part of of your process, and people can read on that. You spell out that process in great detail for us, and we appreciate that. So, the second thing that came to mind when I read this was, how about if there's a way before a hard bounce to recognize that this trigger event, that is, this person has left the company, if you could capture that. And it's become very fashionable now for companies, especially for customer-facing parts of their organization, to create a left the company email. And as a manager, we used to set these all the time because we wanted our customers to know that we're still taking care of them, that, Matt's left the company, but don't worry, say Sally is here to help out, right? She has replaced that role, and now you can communicate with Sally. And generally speaking, for the person who left, we would keep their email on so that we could capture the things that they were, day to day doing, and make sure business didn't fall through the cracks. And so we're finding in our research that these left the company emails are a precursor of at least a month, oftentimes 6 weeks to a quarter, before a hard bounce actually occurs. So how would that, how do you think that would impact your process?
It's a good idea, because here's the dilemma. The dilemma is that these left the company, out of office, on vacation things happen so often that most people, it's too much effort to actually scrape all that stuff. They say to themselves, oh, that's interesting, I'll get to that later. What you and I both know is later equals never.
Never, right.
So there's value in this, because the question is, how long do people leave that email active before they turn on the no longer with the company thing? Because you're totally right.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of people do, though, is they don't have a left the company alert. They just redirect it to somebody else.
Mm.
The dilemma sometimes, though, is, and I've seen data that suggests 28% of all vendor switches are triggered by a change in account managers. And a lot of that is because customers aren't told when it happens. So they send an email to somebody else. It doesn't get responded to right away. They get frustrated and they leave. So if people aren't using this left the company piece, they should turn it on right away.
Agreed.
So at least then the customer's educated, and you're actually going to hang on to your existing clients longer. And then when prospects do that then, as you say, creates an opportunity to say, hang on a second, how do I find out who their replacement is sooner? How do I find out where they went sooner? And who did they replace? I find that out sooner. So it actually creates a lot of opportunities to be first in. And whether you say 4 or 6 weeks, I think it's actually a lot longer. I think the left the company, I don't have data, but I think the left the company is on for at least 6 to 9 months before they start bouncing.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I think that we can speculate on that. I've seen, certainly in my experience, it's more than a quarter. But I think this is something that we'll watch over time to see how long that actually happens. But clearly, there's a timing advantage there.
So that would be interesting for you to collect some data, sort of when you first collect the left the company versus the hard bounce.
Mm-hmm.
That then will tell people from your perspective how big an advantage they get to be first in, whether it's days, weeks, or months. I would argue it's probably at least 3 or 6 months.
Agreed. And that's a great data point, and we are working hard to collect that. So we'll get back to everyone on that when we have that information. So there's this big wave around account-based marketing, right? And I think it's a good notion, and it's sort of old coming to the new, and there's a lot more emphasis behind it. When you think about these trigger events in the context of account-based marketing, how do you think it shapes and strengthens the strategies around it, account-based marketing.
So here's my take on what ABM is. So for years, I'm going to say it's been at least 7, marketing automation has been saying, don't call people. Like, drive them more content, give them more content. They'll pick up the phone and they'll call you. And then what began to happen is the challenger sales said, go challenge the status quo. But even the data I've seen around doing the challenger stuff, because there's already a relationship, you don't get a call back. The data I've seen says, using multiple points of data, it says 6.5% of the time you get a second meeting, right? So, and that's because you're focused where there's already a relationship. In the ABM space, what I love about account-based marketing or account-based selling is it's much more proactive. How are you going to find a way to reach out to people? And learning when the right time is to reach out. I hear this all the time. People say, I've only got 150 customers. I know them all. Well, you might know them all, but you don't know when every person leaves the company, gets promoted, or anything else of that nature. And unless you're first in on those opportunities, if you're second in, so here's the data. The data says if you're first in, odds are you win the business is about 74%.
Right.
Do you want to guess what the odds are if you're second in?
Much lower.
Yeah, like 1/5, 16%.
Oh, right.
So any advantage you can use to say within an account, you've got multiple players. One leaves, that one person can make a big difference. Now, there's 2 reasons to do this. One is because it lets you penetrate into an account, but 2, it also makes sure you keep an account. The other thing I think about is also how do you generate more revenue in accounts you have. So I've got this relationship. It's at a certain level in an organization. Got this guy named Matt. He's a nice enough guy. He gives me some business, but I want more. I want to talk to Matt's boss. And Matt already has this preferred vendor. So he's not going to introduce me to his boss. And I can't go around Matt because if I piss him off, he'll cut me off. Well, as soon as Matt has gone, guess what?
Now it's time.
Go to his boss. Now it's time to go chase or pursue other business, and I'm not going to risk the business that I already have.
Right. Exactly. So one last question for you. So let's say that we have a way to automate the identification and the alerting on these types of trigger events left the company.
Yep.
How do you think that improves the process? I think it certainly gives us a timing advantage, which is critical in your method. What else do you see there?
So there's an element of the challenger sale two elements of the challenger sale I agree with. One, you want to talk to the people called mobilizers, so those that are new in their job.
Right.
The other piece is then challenging what people, like, oh, what you use, going to someone and say, Matt, what you use, it's stupid. Are you an idiot? Like, how long have you been doing this for? How do you keep your job? That doesn't work. But what's interesting is what I've learned when people are new in a job, this is when you get to challenge what they think is the problem. When you get to reframe that problem, then you get to help design the solution. And when you define the problem, design the solution, you're also developing a relationship, which means you're more likely to get chosen. So I'm a big fan. Bosworth, in his first book, I think it was called Consultative Selling, had these 9 boxes.
Exactly.
I want to say it was chapter 6, but I haven't read that book for, 20 years. There's all about go back. Don't respond to an RFQ. You need to go back and redefine the problem.
Exactly.
So I talk to VPs of sales all the time, and I know what drives them crazy is their reps can't close deals. So I'll pick up the phone and say, hey, Matt, congratulations on the new job. I have a really simple way for your rep to close more deals. I'm curious how far down your list that is. And they're like, it's the top of the list. When can we talk about it? So I have a process I use called the 7-second sale. But when I get a chance to talk to that person and a second person in the company, I tell them the problem isn't closing. The problem is prospecting. And the problem is qualifying. And here's why your reps can't close. So I'm helping them completely redefine the problem. So then I get to help them redesign the solution. Then I'm developing the relationship. And then because I've framed the problem in a way and designed the solution in a certain way, I've eliminated a lot of my competition.
Yes.
And they're not going to talk to them.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that idea that, capturing these trigger events and automating as much as possible gives you that advantage to reframe the problem and be able to sell more effectively first in. I love it. Absolutely a winning solution.
And if you can do it well, it's what I call a 7-second sale. And I've written about this. People go, you can't win a deal in 7 seconds. And I'm like, Okay, maybe you can't win a deal in 7 seconds, but you can lose it in 7 seconds. So you get to choose whether you're going to lose that or win it in 7 seconds. So if people want to learn a little bit more about this process, I've written about it. It's called the 7-second sale.
Yeah.
And if they go to 7secondsale.com, it will redirect them to a whole piece. I explain this. And then instead of using bounces, now if you use left the companies, it's
Right.
even more relevant than what I wrote about in the past.
Yeah, that's great. I've read that series. It's wonderful. I encourage everybody to go do that. So, Craig, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. We really appreciate it. I think, the 5 ways that we discussed here are going to be invaluable for the audience. And again, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Good luck, everybody.
All right.